Iron. In this video, we're going to talk about the best monk builds for Season 25. So I'm going to show you the top 6 builds that you need if you're playing a monk in Season 25. So I'm going to show you the best GR speed build, the best monk pushing build, the T16 for farming with normal rifts, and also bounty build. So there's going to be one complete guide for all your monk needs. So the seeing here is the inner monk build for farming great rifts with the water inner mystic ally. This is by far the best build to make if you're just making a monk or if you still don't have really good gear, as you can just speed through every great rift in about a minute or so. This is by far my most played build on the monk because I really like going really quick so I can get a lot of gear, and it's also a good amount of paragon as well. And also if you need something like Hellforce Embers, this is also the best build for it. Once you start playing it quite a bit and you gear it out really well, you can actually do about 110s in less than a minute. But of course requires a lot of gear and paragon. But even with the base set, you can do about 90s to 100s in under 1 minute. So it's really nice and really good and efficient. So in terms of the gear, we have an Echoing Fury here. And you want percent damage, attack speed, and cooldown reduction. And of course, it always rolls with percent damage and attack speed, so you just want the cooldown reduction as well. For the soul shard, you want a Direction of Lies with cold damage. And then also, where you hit an enemy, you get a passive buff that goes from 1 and all the way up to 100, increasing your pet damage by even more. For the rings, you want flat damage, and crit chance. For the gloves, you want dexterity, crit chance, crit damage, and cooldown reduction. Using all kills here, and you want dexterity, vitality, cooldown, and mystic eye damage. For the helmet, you want dexterity, vitality, crit chance. And for the chest, you want dexterity, vitality, mystic eye damage. For the belt, you want toughness, so you're going for dexterity, vitality, all resistance, and percent life. For the pants, you want dexterity, vitality, and all resistance. For the boots, you're using the coolest boots. And the most important here is the secondary. You want as close to 200 as possible. Even if I found an ancient with 190, I would not equip this over this, as the secondary is the most important factor. After that, you want dexterity, vitality, all resistance, and armor. For the amulet, using Scourge Amulet. And here you want cold damage, and crit chance. For the braces, using all kills, and here you want cold damage, you want crit chance, and then you also want dexterity. For the second weapon, we're using an ingeom, and here the most important factor is getting a high secondary. So I have a primal here, but if you can't find one, you want at least a 9 or a 10-second secondary. And after that, cooldown reduction, percent damage are the way to go. For Linjo gems, you want to have Enforcer for the pet damage. You want Bane the Trap for the increased overall damage. And you also want Saystone Avengers for even more damage. And one of the most important factors for all your items here are the secondary. You want pickup radius. You want it everywhere you can possibly get. So you want it on your pants, your chest piece, your gloves. Wherever you can basically get pickup radius, you want that. I have 12 right now, but if you get up to something like 16 or 18, you're going to fly through it. It's actually one of the most important stats for this build because you're going so quick. So in most cases, the pickup radius is actually more important than, for instance, say a 2% damage increase. I'd much rather have the pickup radius. In terms of the cube, you want Mrs. Reaver. This can allow you to just dash around a lot quicker. You want Bounties and Push Gr, of course, for 200% increased damage. You want Ring of Royal Grandeur to have all kills and inner at the same time. We have done the Fist, Blazing Fist, Mystic Ally, Water Ally, Cyclone Strike with Implosion, Serenity Ascension, Dashing Strike, Quicksilver, Epiphany Desert Shroud, Seized Initiative, Relentless Assault, Need Experience. You could also swap this to Unity for even more damage if you want to, and Being of Vidar. So this build is just exceptional for going really quick through the entire map. Basically, you want to see you one-shot every mob you pass, and then you only have to stop at the elite for maybe a second to cast a Cyclone Strike to proc your braces, but everything else you just die as you pass by them, so you can clear the greatest in under 1 minute. Now next one we're looking at is the 5 version with the Echoing Fury and ingeom. This build is really good for going a bit higher than you were before, but you can still clear really fast. So you can clear about 120 to 125, of course depending on gain paragon, but you could do it in about 2 minutes and 2.5. So this is what I would call the next step in terms of your progression. So you go from the other build before in terms of the water build going really quick. This will be the next step. This might be the most efficient build actually, because you can't find that sweet spot in terms of still going really quick, but you're also able to clear a lot higher than before. Now the good thing about this one is that you can still clear a lot of the things you find because you're using a lot of cooldown reduction. So basically you either stop for a big pack of enemies or you would stop for elite. And of course you then use your Fire Mystic Ally to basically do one massive pop that kills everything inside. And I'd probably recommend that this is the build you play the most out of all the builds that I show you now. So in terms of the gear, you want a Direction of Lies with fire, and also of course the stacking buff that goes up to 100. And for the weapons, you want an Echoing Fury with percent damage, attack speed, cooldown reduction. On the wings, you want flat damage, and then crit damage and crit chance. For the gloves, you want dexterity, crit damage, crit chance, and cooldown reduction. For the shoulders, using the all kills, and here you want dexterity, vitality, cooldown, and mystic ally damage. For the helmet, you want dexterity, vitality, crit chance. And of course, the Sliver of Terror with dexterity and then attack speed and crit chance for every spell on cooldown. For chest piece, you want dexterity, vitality, mystic ally damage. For the belt, dexterity, vitality, all resistance, and percent life. For the pants, you want dexterity, vitality, all resistance. For the boots, Crutus boots, make sure to max this out in the secondary. Get at least 190 in 195 if you can. And then after that, you want dexterity, vitality, all resistance. For the amulet, Squirt's amulet, get 5% crit damage, crit chance. For the oracle braces, get 5 damage, crit chance, and dexterity. And of course, for the ingeom, get a high secondary, 9 or 10 seconds. And then you want cooldown reduction and percent damage. And for Lindo gems, you want Glory of Swiftness for even more attack speed and cooldown reduction. You want Bane the Trap for more damage, and of course also an Enforcer to increase the power of your pets, which is your Mystic Allies. So for this build here, you basically want as much cooldown reduction as you possibly can, because that allows you to pop more enemies often. For the Q, Miss Weaver for cooldown reduction, Binding of Lizard Guards to increase the damage of your Mystic Allies. This is a must-have for any kind of build where you're using the Mystic Allies, especially the fire build. So make sure you hit your enemies with the Cyclone before you proc the Mystic Ally. Wing Frog Grinder for all killed and the inner piece, of course, at the same time. Rift Thunder Fist, Blazing Fist for attack speed and crit chance. Mystic Ally, Fire Ally, this is your bread and butter. Pop this when you have everything going and you have, of course, cycloned enemies. Psychic Strike Implosion to proc your brace and pull enemies in. Serenity Ascension, Dash Strike Radiance for attack speed. Use this to fly around the map and look for either big packs of enemies or, of course, elites. Epiphany Desert Shroud, Siege Initiative, Guardian's Path, Near Experience. You could also swap this to Unit if you want more damage. And of course, also Beacon of Yidor. And as I mentioned before, this is probably the build you want to spend the most time on this entire season if you're playing a monk. And now for the Grave Speed build, which has the most damage. So this is a fire ally with the Shenlongs build. And basically, because we have the Shenlongs here, we can go more than 5 tiers above any other build without the Shenlong, because it's a massive damage increase. So it's going to be the highest you can go in terms of GR speed, but it's also going to be a bit slower. But it might feel clunky until you find out how to play it. It is a complete elite hunter. You can kill nothing else but elites. But if you get used to this build, it is just amazing for going really, really high and still clearing within 3 minutes. So it's all about using your Desert Shroud to teleport, and also, of course, having your Dashing Strike. And you basically want to fly through the entire map and look for elites. And then when you kill it, you want to make sure you one-shot every elite, because if you don't, you're not going to reset your ingeom and you're going to be waiting there for a long time waiting for cooldowns. The only elites that should not get one-shot would be, for instance, a Juggernaut or an Illusions pack, but you should one-shot 90% of all elites so you can quickly move on and find more elites after that. So in terms of the gear, the most important differential here is, of course, the Shenlong's weapon and also the Soul Shard. So you might notice here for the Drakes of Lies here, we're using, of course, fire. But here we're using the one so when you kill an elite enemy, it reduces all your active cooldowns by 5 seconds. And then you might think, wouldn't the other one that gives you a flat damage increase to pets by the 1 to 100 stacks be better? And sure, it will be more damage. But this one here, reducing the cooldowns, is really, really important for this build, as it basically makes the build a lot more consistent. Let's say you have an elite pack with 4 guys, so you have the elite and then his minions. If you just kill, let's say, 1 or even 2 of the minions with your fire pop, this would still allow you to basically do another pop straight after that, because it reduced the cooldowns. So even though the damage is lower, it just makes the build way more consistent, so you can do about 2.5 minute runs all the time, really. So I highly recommend getting the Drakes of Life with a 5-second cooldown reduction on it. So for the weapons here, the Shenlongs, you want percent damage and cooldown reduction, and of course applies to both the weapons. For the rings, you want a flat damage roll, you want crit damage and crit chance. For the gloves, you want dexterity, crit chance, crit damage, and cool reduction. For the shoulders, all kills for increased elite damage, and then you also want dexterity, vitality, cool reduction, and Mystic Ally damage. For the helmet, we want dexterity, vitality, and crit chance, and of course for the Slave of Terror, dexterity and then attack speed and crit chance for every spell and cooldown. Chest piece, dexterity, vitality, Mystic Ally damage. For the belt, dexterity, vitality, all resistance, and percent life. For the pants, dexterity, vitality, and all resistance. For the boots, you want Crutus boots, get a 195 or higher secondary, and then after that, dexterity, vitality, all resistance, and armor. For amulet, Squirt's amulet, get 5% crit damage and crit chance. For the braces, get all kills here with fire skill, crit chance, and dexterity. And of course, for Lindo gems, get the Glory of Swiftness for increased cooldown reduction and attack speed. Bane the Trap for increased damage, and also Enforcer for pet damage. For the keyword ingeom, this is the biggest factor determining if you're gonna do well or not with this build. After killing the first elite, within that window of 15 seconds, you need to find a new elite pack. Basically every time. And I know sometimes you can't because there just isn't any in the map, but you really need to try hard to look for it. This means using your Epiphany Desert Shroud to teleport, and also having your Dashing Strike and just spamming these two. Now this one might struggle in terms of the gameplay, so I'm gonna link a video in the corner now. It's about a 3-minute video that helps a lot in terms of the gameplay, where I basically show you how to do it. Of course, Binding of Lizard Guards for increased damage with your pet. Make sure you hit your enemies with Cyclone before you pop your Mystic Ally. And of course, Rank Grinder for all kills and inner, so you can get the full effect of both sets. We've done the fist here with blazing fist for attack speed and movement speed, Mr. Gr damage with fire. Make sure to pop this after everything is done, so basically use all your abilities, get them on cooldown for the extra damage, and of course also after you cyclone strike with implosion, that's when you pop your Mr. Ally, so you pop everything around you. So when the ascension, dashing strike radiance, and epiphany desert shroud. And of course for the passive, Seized Initiative, Guardian's Path, Neither Experience, you could also swap this to Unity if you want to, and then Beacon of Yidar. Now for what I'd probably consider one of the best builds within this entire game, the Inner Monk for T16 speed farming. Now even if you don't main a monk, I really recommend making this build for any other character, because it's by far the best build for speed farming regular rifts to get creative keys. The sheer movement speed and dashing potential for this build is just insane. And if you optimize it and play correctly, you can get over 200 creative keystones per hour. In terms of gear, here we have an Echoing Fury, and with the Soul Shard, Stain of Sin. Now the most important factor here is that you gain an additional rift progress orb when you kill an elite enemy. Now if you are struggling with damage, you could go with the Dregs of Lies with cold damage and then the stacking buff from 1 to 100 in terms of pit damage. But if you can play with the Stain of Sin, this would be a massive time saver because it gives you more progress orbs every rift you do. And it should be doable to play with it even at say 800 or 1000 Paragon as long as your gear is decent. Now for the rings, using average band here to get the increased pickup radius for gold and everything like that. We're seeing the Radius Ring of Larceny. Now there are two major factors here you want to consider. There's the chance of fear and hit, as you can see is 4.3. And then there's also the increased movement speed for 4 seconds after fearing. So basically this ring will fear the enemy and then also give you more movement speed once they are feared. So it's really, really important that you get high in both of them, especially the chance to fear and hit, but also the movement speed itself. Now another good thing is that Echoing Fury also gives you chance of fear and hit, so you basically have this buff up all the time. So for the gloves you want dexterity, crit damage, crit chance, cooldown reduction. For the shoes you want dexterity, vitality, cooldown, and Mr. Gr damage. For the helmet, you want dexterity, vitality, crit chance. And for Slip of Terror, you want dexterity, you want attack speed, and crit chance for every spell on cooldown. We're also actually using the all kills chest here, and you want dexterity, vitality, Mr. Gr damage. For the belt, you want dexterity, vitality, all resistance, and percent life. For the pants, dexterity, vitality, all resistance. And for the boots, you actually use the inners here, you want dexterity, vitality, all resistance, and armor. For the amulet, using Scourge Amulet, you want cold damage, you want crit damage, and crit chance. Now for the braces, we're using the War Session Armor Guards for the increased movement speed when you destroy an object. And here you want cold damage, crit chance, and dexterity. And of course, as the other weapon, you want high damage roll, you want percent damage and cooldown action, and of course also a high secondary. I would say 9 or 10 seconds is a must. For the gems, using Bane the Trap for increased damage, using Enforcer for even more damage, and then also the Boon of the Hoarder for increased gold, and then also movement speed when you pick up this gold. For the cube, Mrs. Weaver for increased cooldown action, Crutus Boots for increased Mystic Eye damage, and of course also the Ring of Royal Grandeur, so you can have all kills and inners on at the same time. You want Serenity Ascension, you want Mystic Ally, Water Ally, you want Magical Conviction with Annihilation. Now you do gain the base effect of the spell from the inner build, but what we're after is the passive so you get more movement speed. You want Breath of Haven for even more movement speed. You want Dashing Strike, Quicksilver to of course dash around, Epiphany Desert Shroud for toughness, and you want Fleet Footed for movement speed, Seized Initiative for attack speed, Neither Experience, you could also swap this to Unity for more damage, and then Beacon of Yidar for cooldown reduction. Now in my opinion, this is a must-have build for anyone playing this season really, and it's most likely also gonna be the best build for speed farming any T16 in the future. Even next season, let's say the build actually gets nerfed in terms of like the Mystic Ally gets nerfed, this will still be the best build for speed farming T16, unless there's something like major nerfs, but you really need to make this build now. Now the next build we're looking at is the Bounty build. This is by far the best build for farming bounties in this game right now, and it probably also will be in the future. Even if inner is nerfed quite heavily, this will probably still be the best build for farming bounties. So you really need to make this build now as just the best, especially when we're coming up on end season now. You really want to speed farm bounties, and it's by far the best build to do it with. So as you can see, the build is quite different from what we're used to with our T16 or our speed GR builds. We're actually using the inner's reach Stybo here, and also using some raiment pieces. So we're actually able to get the 6 piece of the inner build and also the 4 piece of the raiment by using this combination of items here, which allows for really high damage and also really good clear time, because we can dash infinitely with the raiment 4 piece here. Now if you're not used to the raiment, let me just explain you why. So basically the 4 piece here, dashing strike spends 75 spirit, but Reef wants to charge when it does. So basically what we want to do is we want to be able to dash as much as possible, but as you might notice, 75 spirit is quite a bit. So you want as much resource cost reduction as possible, and also a lot of spirit regeneration. Now for the ribbon, we're using the inner's reach. Now this is probably the most difficult item to get here, because you want poison damage, and you also want cool reduction and resist cost reduction if possible. And you of course also want a decent high misstack ally damage, but the other stats are more important since you're gonna have more than enough damage anyway. And if you can't get these exact numbers here, something like cool reduction and spirit regen is also really good. But basically anything that gives you cool reduction, resist cost reduction, and spirit regen, those are the main ideal stats you want. And as you can see here, our Ace of Anguish, we have cold damage of course for our misstack ally. And you also have the 15 stacks here, right? So you get 15 increased stacks for movement speed and cool reduction when you do poison damage. Now for things, we're sitting with the Zodiac here. Now I actually rerolled mine incorrectly here. I actually want to be attack speed and then also cool reduction and resist cost reduction. So you actually want to reroll the crit chance array. Now I made this for another build, but that's how you want to roll it. Of course, Rachel swing velocity here. There are two secondaries to keep an eye on here. You want a high chance of fear on hit, and you also want a high increased movement speed after fear. And after that, you want crit damage, attack speed, and cool reduction. For the gloves, if you can get a quad factor like this would be amazing. But the most important stats would be the resource cost reduction, the cool reduction, and the critical hit damage. For the shoulders, you want dexterity, vitality, cool reduction, and misstack ally damage. For the helmet, you want dexterity, vitality, crit chance, and of course a Sliver of Terror with dexterity and then attack speed and crit chance for every spell and cooldown. Chest piece, dexterity, vitality, and misstack ally damage. On the belt, you want dexterity, vitality, all resistance, and percent life. On the pants, you want dexterity, vitality, and all resistance. On the boots, you want dexterity, vitality, all resistance, and armor. Amulet, using Scourge Amulet, and here you want cold damage, critical hit damage, and critical hit chance. And of course, for the braces, Bind of the God, get a really high secondary. I would recommend at least 190. And after that, you want cold damage and critical hit chance. Now for linear gems, you want the Goal of Swiftness for increased attack speed and cool reduction. Bane the Trap for increased damage, and also of course Enforcer for even more damage after that. For Canized Cube, you want ingeom, you want Cruelest Boots, and Wingfoil Grandeur. In terms of spells, you want to get Weird Thunder Fist with Blazing Fist. You want to get Misstack Items with Water Ally. You want to get Mantra of Healing with Circular Breathing for even more regeneration of spirit. You also want Cyclone Strike Implosion. You really only need to use a Cyclone Strike on bosses to proc it so you can use your braces. Dashing Strike with Quicksilver to move around even quicker. And then of course also Epiphany with Insight for an insane amount of spirit regen. Our passive Seize to use it for attack speed. Assault for even more spirit regen. Need the experience, you could also swap this to even more spirit regen or unity for more damage, and also Beacon of Heater for cool reduction. So if you're going to be playing Bounties this season, I would highly recommend playing this build. It is just able to fly through everything and just one-shot stuff. Now last build we're looking at is the Monk Gr solo push build. This by far is the best and easiest build to play here in Season 25 when it comes to pushing really high. And even at let's say 1500 Paragon, as long as you have decent gear, you can actually do 150 with this setup here. It's really good and also quite tanky. Once you get used to it, and if you get really good gear, you can basically clear every 150 you open. It doesn't matter what kind of map or what kind of rift you have. Every 150 you open, you can actually clear just by using this build here. Now that will of course require a bit of Paragon and gear, but it is possible once you get used to the build. Now for the ribbons, we're using this Shenlongs combination here. And on both the ribbons, you want percent damage and attack speed really. For the Drakes of Lies, of course get 5% skill damage increase, and then also get the stacking buff going from 0 to 100. For the rings, get compass rolls, and here you want a flat damage roll, you want crit damage, you want crit chance. And for the other ring, using a combination of elements, and the most important thing here is a secondary. You want to get at least 190 and even 195. Even if it's a non-ancient or an ancient, it doesn't matter. The high secondary is the most important factor when it comes to a combination of elements. And after that, you want attack speed or flat damage, and then crit chance and crit damage. For the gloves, get a quad factor. You want attack speed, crit damage, crit chance, and cool reduction. For the shoulders, you want the Lefebvre's. You want cool reduction, misstack ally damage, a high secondary. I would say at least 45 or higher. And also dexterity. On the helmet, you want dexterity, vitality, crit chance. And of course, also the Slave of Terror, get dexterity and then attack speed and critical hit chance. For chest piece, get dexterity, vitality, and misstack ally damage. For the belt, dexterity, vitality, all resistance, and percent life. For the pants, you want dexterity, vitality, all resistance. And for the boots, the coolest boots, get a high secondary. I would say at least 195. And then after that, dexterity, vitality, all resistance, and armor. For the amulet, get a Traveler's Pledge. You want 5% damage, you want critical hit damage, and critical hit chance. For the braces, Spirit Guards, get a high secondary, I would say 55 or above. And also fire damage, crit chance, and dexterity. Now you need a bit of cool reduction in order to play the rotation correctly. Anything about 36 should be fine, so 38 or for instance in my case 40 here, that should be a good number. I get about 38 to 42% cool reduction. Now for the cube, at the weapon we have the Flying Dragon. You have a chance to double your attack speed when attacking. This is so important to really understand how this item works. You basically want to be attacking every time when you are pushing with this build. If you see here my damage, I have 9 million damage right now. If I just start punching through the air like this, at some point it will double. As you can see, we just made 18 million. You want to make sure you have this number, this buff here from the Flying Dragon, before you pop your misstack ally. I'm going to explain that a bit further in just a minute here. For the armor slot, we have Bounties and Push Gr, of course, to increase the damage enemies take from your Cyclone Strike by 200%. So make sure enemies are hit by this before you pop your Mystic Ally. And of course, Ring of Rock Grandeur here, so we can also have the shoulders and the braces on and still get the full effect of the inner piece. Now we have the 100 Fist here with Assimilation. This is basically a massive damage increase that stacks depending on how many mobs there are. Mystic Ally with Fire Ally, Cyclone Strike Implosion, Serenity Ascension, Dashing Strike Blinding Speed, and then also Inner Sank Temple of Protection. For the passive Seize the Initiative, Guardian's Path, Near Death Experience, you can also swap the Unity for more damage, and then also Being of Yidor. Now the playstyle for this one is a bit difficult at first, but once you get used to it, it's pretty simple. So there's a few things we want to factor into when you're playing this build. We have the Sliver of Terror, so basically we get more damage for every skill on cooldown. We have the Flying Dragon, of course, doubling our damage when that is procced. And also then, of course, Convention of Elements. And also the Shenlongs weapon here. So as you can see, there's quite a few different buffs you want to make sure we have before we use our Fire Ally pop. So let me just try and explain a few things first. Of course, let's look at the Convention of Elements first. This is the most important factor. We want to make sure we have spells on cooldown, of course, pop within our window. Of course, we're using fire builds, so we want to make sure we are popping into fire. Now, so one thing you'll notice is that we have Serenity Ascension and also Inner Sank. We want to have these both on cooldown and going when we use our Fire Mystic Ally, because those are both cooldowns that will tie into our Sliver of Terror, increasing our damage by a lot. So basically, it's all about your rotation here. You know, just run around in your Rift, and you of course dash around, hit enemies, use your Cyclone Strike Implosion to pull them in. And then once you see you're about to hit your cold rotation, you want to get ready. So basically, on cold, as soon as you hit cold, you want to use your Serenity Ascension, and halfway through, you want to use your Inner Sank. Now you're on fire, and then you pop your Mystic Ally, of course. Now let me show you again. Of course, when you're running through the Rift, of course, you're going to dash around, and the dash will also count as a cooldown. And of course, the Cyclone Strike to pull enemies in, and also proc your braces you have in the cube. And of course, you want to be hitting stuff to, of course, proc your Assimilation and also your Flying Dragon. So it's all about the timing. You want to make sure your Flying Dragon is going, your Serenity Ascension is going, your Inner Sank is going, and your Dash Strike is also on cooldown. So basically, if you can time all of these to the point where you have all of them on cooldown and you have Flying Dragon activated, if you get all that done on your fire and just before your fire, you're going to do an insane amount of damage. And we of course also have the Shenlongs buff here. So basically you get 350% increased damage when you have this debuff going. So as you can see, we're slowly regenerating spirit. And then once you hit full on spirit, you're gonna start losing spirit. So you don't want to use your pop when you are regenerating spirit. You only use your pop here while you are losing spirits when you really want to use it, right? You want to pop doing that debuff you see here. So it's all about just having those things going. You want to have your Flying Dragon and all your spells on cooldown before you hit the fire window. And on the fire window, you then want to pop your Mystic Ally, of course, and you'll see everything just blow up. And also make sure you, of course, have your Spirit Guards and your defeat push going at all times to get a damage reduction from these two items here. If you want to see how to farm Paragon like a maniac in every season, watch this video here, as it contains the best tips and tricks for farming Paragon. And I'll see you in that video. Peace out, everyone.